Open the doors.
All right, so I showed my background.
I think I can move this around a little bit. Now, this is video for us or video for everyone?
For everyone, I think, right?
Everyone.
Yeah,
And
everyone.
we're on, so
This
we're
is
letting
being
They're going
recorded.
to see you in all your big smiling glory.
There you go.
Good for us.
Good morning, everyone. We're going to wait a minute while everyone joins this webinar. And
Now,
then
are we going to see all of them?
No. So,
No, they're coming into the room right now, Kevin. So this is a webinar. So you will
Okay.
only see the panelists.
Okay.
So as everyone's coming into the room, I just want to remind you that when we begin, you have a button on the bottom right, a Q&A, where you can type in questions, and David Kilmick will grab those questions as well.
Okay, so let's begin as they come in. Good morning, everyone. I'm Anthony Forgione, the Director of Business Development for the HIA-LI, and I want to welcome you to this wonderful program we're having, speaking about transformational leadership and leading through unprecedented times. And this morning we have a wonderful panel of Long Island leaders that really have made an impact on our economy and in our region. But before we begin the program, I do want to thank the dignitaries and the board members that are watching or in attendance right now. You know, we're blessed to be supported by these leaders who help carry out our initiatives on a daily basis. I also want to thank the co-chairs that are on, because, you know, they're the backbone and the livelihood of our committees. So I want to thank them. And I also want to thank our sponsors today, B&B Bank and Long Island Cares. You know, sponsors really are the backbone of our programs, and they really help us deliver these programs in the way we want to you. So let's begin this program. So without further ado, let me introduce the president and CEO of the HIA-LI, Terry Elise Maselli.
Thanks so much, Anthony. Good morning, everyone. Hope you're staying safe, healthy, strong through all this. I have to say, as I thought about it this morning, it's been about 7 months that the first COVID case hit in March. Feels a lot longer than that to many of us. But what I watched was all of you as members just spring into action. And I have to tell you, you know that the HIA-LI has been alongside you, springing into action and really disseminating some really important information as it relates to New York Forward, working with New York State itself, and working with the Suffolk County COVID Business Task Force, disseminating that information, creating a coronavirus section, certainly on our website. And what I've been most proud of is watching all of you, our members, many of you who have repurposed your manufacturing plants to provide personal protection equipment on the fly. I mean, that quickly and swiftly. Many of you giving guidance to other Long Island businesses in terms of how to get stimulus funds, how to use PPP. And I know we have Kevin O'Connor on, who really was instrumental in getting people that money when we needed it the most. We've seen a keen sense of collaboration like never before, not only with the HIA-LI, but many of the things that you guys are doing as members. And we've seen you do some remarkable things. Could not be prouder through these times. So we're going to talk about transformational leadership, right? The art of transforming or leading a team through change and through changes. And many of you have said, and we all agree, I'm certainly on this panel, that we've had to make really difficult decisions through COVID, right? And changes that we never thought would have happened before. But, I'm delighted to have these panelists and this moderator with us, because they've done so many impressive things, not only with their staff, but helping the business community. So our moderator is David Kilmick. He is the CEO of LGBT. He is no stranger to the HIA-LI. Before I turn it over to him, I just want to remind everybody who's on the call that if you look on your bottom right-hand screen, we really encourage you to put questions in there. All you have to do is type them in. and David will grab them and disseminate them to the panelists, and we will answer them as well. So David, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Terry, and thank you, Anthony, and good morning. First, would like to thank the HIA for keeping us going these past 7 months and making sure that we're all still connected and doing important programs like this. So thank you, Terry, for your leadership. It's really appreciated. As Terry said, my name is David Kilnick. I'm the founder and CEO of the LGBT Network. I founded the organization 27 years ago when I was a student at Stony Brook University studying for my master's in social work. And I'll try and be quick. It was our last semester where we had to choose to either do a master's thesis or a master's project. And I said, oh God, a big paper or a project? I'm going to choose the project so I don't have to write a paper. And the project that I decided to do was to create a curricula to go into Long Island schools to talk about what it was like to grow up LGBT. And this was back in 1993. And I got into a few schools, and when I say I got into, sounds like it was a secretive mission and on the down low, and it pretty much was. But no matter where I conducted this workshop, and it stretched all the way from Uniondale out to East Hampton, kids would wait at the end of the 42 minutes, they would shuffle their papers, they would hit some stuff on the floor, just so that they could come up and feel safe to ask the gay speaker a question where no one would see them. And that question was the same, whether it was in Uniondale or Ronkonkoma, East Hampton, or in between. The question simply was, is there any place I could go just to meet other people like myself? And back in 1993, there wasn't, so I started an organization at that time called Long Island Gay and Lesbian Youth, or Legally. Fast forward 27 years later, we've morphed into a network of nonprofit organizations that serve the LGBTQ community throughout the lifespan, including seniors, adults, families, you name it. We're providing a wide range of health support, advocacy services to the community and also to the business community as well, and to the general Long Island community. We serve a couple of 100,000 people a year through our education, support, and social services. And in this difficult time of COVID, because we are a community center, in fact, our main center or our corporate headquarters are in the park in Hauppauge. And we haven't opened yet, but we are targeting January to open because we are a community center and that brings people together. And we just want to make sure that our staff and community are safe and we are putting those measures into place, because we'd be having this program at our center if we weren't dealing in these times. But you know, so I'm excited to be here today and to moderate an incredible panel who I'm going to shut up in a few seconds and have them talk. But I just want to give a brief overview of transformational leadership and, you know, why it's so important in these times during COVID. So a lot of folks ask, what is transformational leadership? Transformational leadership is a leadership approach that causes changes in individuals and social systems. When it's enacted in its true, authentic form, transformational leadership enhances the motivation, morale, and performance of followers through a variety of mechanisms. So that's the brief overview of, or definition of, what transformational leadership is. So why is it important now during COVID? You know, transformational leadership has consistently been associated with positive mental health for the workforce. You know, and we've been hearing a lot of, you know, folks' mental health and having to quarantine or having to deal with loved ones or themselves who have come down with the virus, and just dealing with a whole bunch of issues that certainly have come to light. It includes such behaviors as stating a vision for the group or revisioning for the group, communicating expectations clearly, and delivering realistic and positive messages on those expectations, which is difficult in these times. It also embraces value-based behavior, such as doing the right thing even when it's difficult. You know, and that's real important, doing the right thing when it is difficult. And transformational leaders should possess an insatiable social conscience. And that is extremely important in these times. We have transformational leaders have an intuitive ability to identify the right thing to do and relentlessly pursue it. And COVID-19 has only deepened the disparities we see in our society, or here in America, in our nation, and closer to home, Long Island. Those disparities include health, employment, or unemployment, and economic and social justice in the United States. And transformational leadership, in a nutshell, means truly caring for employees as individuals. And that couldn't be more important in these unprecedented times. So with that as a backdrop, I'm gonna have our panelists introduce themselves and talk about your companies and let folks know a little bit, maybe about 2 minutes, about who you are, your business. And so with that, we'll start with Kevin.
Well, good morning. Thank you. And I do want to acknowledge Terry and her team. The definition of transformational leadership is truly what Terry did and her team to basically pivot from what the organization normally does to how and it's really doing the same thing, but the way she's delivering it. I feel a little bit connected to her because, we're a bank, community bank. We will be the merger we've announced in July, about $11 billion with 66 branches across Long Island. I've been here about 13 years, and sort of feel like she does that our role in this process was to be sort of the sounding board and the support for all of our customers. And so she and I have had a number of conversations about trying to make sure that we're out there because, while everybody's hair is on fire, we're trying to basically be able to be calm and try and help people to get to the other side. So we appreciate this opportunity to talk about it. We can discuss transformational leadership, but it feels like it's the way we're supposed to operate every day. Nothing is a straight line in running a company. These are just some of the roadblocks that come up or some of the challenges, and you have to adjust. And I gladly love to work with Terry and her team on that process.
Thank you, Kevin. And Rich.
Thanks, David. And thanks to the HIA-LI for giving me the opportunity to sit on the panel today. And echoing Kevin's comments, Terry and her team really have just done a fantastic job during this period where, not only did she need to be concerned about the organization, she needed to be concerned about all the members of the organization. And to be able to continue to demonstrate value and to be able to pivot, the way Kevin had made reference, I think is just a great representation of what a strong leader is. So good for you, Terry. For me, I'm the CEO of H2M, Architects and Engineers. We're about a 500-person design firm, headquartered in Melville, but it's really doing architectural and engineering work in the northeastern United States. My whole career has been here, so I've been here for almost 33 years. I was an intern when I was going to college. I started working here, and now a long time later, I'm running the company right now. I think I'm looking forward to the discussion today because we can all learn from each other in times of crisis. And, I've definitely taken a look at how my business needs to develop new strategies and take advantage of what we've learned through the pandemic in order to provide greater flexibility for employees, to enhance our own productivity, our abilities to better communicate. Although, you could take a look at how you push your way through a crisis and be a little closed-minded to what the opportunities might be in learning from the last 7 months. I know for us here and for myself, I've already started to take advantage of some of the things that we were forced to do to continue to conduct business and, leverage some of that experience now into, new business approaches and really having a, very much an employee-centric focus in what a lot of our transformation is going to be here. So I'm looking forward to talking more about that. Thanks.
Well, thank you, Rich. Thank you, Rich. And we'll definitely come back to a little later on talking about how these difficult times sometimes could bring opportunity as well, right? And innovation. David.
So I'm David Friedfeld, president of Clear Vision Optical Company, which is a 71-year-old family business started by my dad in 1949 as a young post-Navy guy that graduated from the Brooklyn Tech College of Opticianry. We've been on Long Island for just about, since 1955, if I'm not mistaken. Before that, it was New York City, and we're located in Hauppauge now. We have 150 employees, down a little bit from pre-COVID times, which I'm happy to talk about. We've had to reduce our sales team and our internal team. COVID has been an exciting journey for us, and I use the word exciting to be both the positive and the negative. When I was asked to be on the panel, I was actually, to be fair, very flattered that somebody would be interested in what I have to say. And I look forward to the discussion because, similar to what Rich said, I think there's some great educational opportunities in sharing. What I did find, and I congratulate both of the guys, the banks on Long Island really stepped up during the time period. We have a PPP loan, and that was important for us. When this whole thing started, my industry was shut down, similar to the airline business and similar to restaurants. So what we do is we manufacture, distribute, and design eyewear and sunwear. All of that's overseas. The challenges are that a lot of the business we do was in Italy and in China. So the two biggest areas of COVID in the world, that was our production centers. Supply chain was interrupted, and my industry was shut down by the CDC. So we weren't open officially till late May, early June, which meant I effectively had no revenues from March 13th through June 1st, which was an exciting time period. That's why I go back to our banking friends. And as far as guys like Rich on Long Island, I belong to a number of business groups, and those business groups were very helpful to me. And the collaboration that Terry spoke about between businesses really helped us quite a bit in that time period. I'm happy to say that things are open in our industry now. We are selling eyewear. We are doing what we need to do. So it's been a good journey from early in the period. Good journey.
Oh, well, thanks for sharing that, David. And I think, what later on, maybe we can come back to, the PPP loan certainly helped many businesses. It helped us too, as a nonprofit. The New York State funding for nonprofits has essentially halted. And I think it just started back up again. I think we finally just received a payment. And so, so the PPP loan certainly did help, but maybe we can come back a little bit later and talk about what other further help is needed, from the government. So, we're going through one of the worst times or unprecedented times. I mean, I don't think any of us could have said, oh, maybe in our lives we'll have a pandemic, that will just shut everything down and, effectively kill 217,000 people as of today in our country, many of our loved ones, and that, where we live, we would be the one of the epicenters of the epidemic. So, so these times really do require exceptional leadership. What have you done to guide your team through this, and what has been some of the outcomes? And I'll leave that open to. It's much easier when we're in person, and I could point. Well, I could do that here too, but.
I mean, I'll jump in real quick. So, for us, we're an industry that basically we've got an administrative support team that can work remotely, but then I've got half of my employees that are on the ground and sort of facing customers. And so we had to figure right away how we were going to basically manage both of those. We were able to send people home, but very sensitive to the people that had to sort of stay on the ground. Mm-hmm. In some ways, the opportunity in the PPP program created for us sort of a cause, and it was an opportunity for us to make a difference and help. I think one of the things that, and positive by nature, optimistic by nature, is that, I've seen so many people step up and really help in every way they can. David, your organization, Terry, so many as you said, this has hit people and basically created some dichotomies of outcomes for both the economy and our population. And so for us, it was an opportunity to really make a difference. And PPP was our basically rallying point for us to put, all of our efforts in, and, we were able to do 4,000 loans and help all of those customers and do it in a way that, hopefully getting them to the other side. I've 3 times today, I've heard 7 months, and it's almost unbelievable. This has been 7 months old, right? I don't know if I'm going to say if it went fast or if it went slow, but just hearing 7 months in echo, and looking forward to, I was in New York City last week and seeing the ball on top. You know, I was walking through Times Square and you see the ball and you can't wait for that to drop so that we turn the page on 2020.
Yeah, yeah, it seems like a lot. It seems like a lot longer than 7 months ago, right? And whoever these 7 months would seem so long, right? From it's almost unfathomable to think that this started in March of this year, right? Here in New York. So, but yeah, once 2020 ends, hopefully we're turning the corner to much brighter times in many ways. So Rich, what has how have you guided your team through this, and what has been the outcome for?
So, yeah, I think going back to late March, when employees scattered and there was no preparation. So not only was there the need to figure out how to run the business, there was the anxiety in every single person that was created by fear of the unknown, the uncertainty. Am I still going to have a job? Am I going to get sick? How am I going to keep my family safe? And from a leadership perspective, really trying to find the right place to be able to be properly reassuring, but also transparent to employees, I thought was critical. And, we did a couple of things early on. One is I had established my chief HR officer as our kind of internal COVID czar, because the information was flying fast and furious, and you were hearing all sorts of things, and to be able to filter that for employees and provide some guidance, I thought was critical. And the second is, we talk about the importance of communication, and I feel as though I used to think that I was a good communicator internally, but I don't think I communicated enough. And there was always a reason not to communicate because I was busy or my priorities were different. Once this thing hit, my whole life turned into communicating with staff and figuring out how to get the business to continue to move forward. And it was daily. So I was doing daily video communications because, how do I now get out to 500 people that are all in their houses? I needed to figure out a way to keep them connected to the organization. And that's frankly one of the reasons why, I was one of the few people that just stayed in the office every day, because we were actually filming videos every day that we could then kind of send out to the employees. So to me, I think, one of the extremely beneficial outcomes of that is that we did stay really connected. And in our business, when you're designing projects for clients, rarely are you working by yourself on a project. You're typically working with a team of 8 or 10 different people, and now you're trying to figure out how to do that remotely, and it was very challenging. So creating the connectivity, communicating really, really well, and now that the employees have found their way, back into the office, I could see just the benefit of how internal communication and how teamwork is kind of fortified in a sense, because we went through this crisis and tried to take advantage as best we could in keeping people connected. So those are probably the highlights for me and how we moved ourselves through it.
Yeah, I mean, and that, in many ways is the one of the epitomes of transformational leadership, is about finding ways to connect and care about our employees as individuals, and communication is very important for that, and gives us a whole different perspective in how we look at doing our jobs as we move through this epidemic and post-epidemic too. Hopefully we get to say in post-epidemic soon. So David, you had a challenging situation in that you just had to be completely shut down. So what was the experience for you, and how you guided your team through this?
So I would tell you this, it was a very interesting time period, personally and for the organization. And we can say that, looking back at it, at the moment, it was extremely scary. We had made business plans for 2020 to be a phenomenal business year, and we were thinking about, quote unquote, transforming the business, and we had some light plans. On Friday the 13th, I don't recall if it was the governor or the whomever it was that said, this is what's going to happen next week. I think it was the governor. I had walked in that morning to our head of finance and said, hey, something's wrong with the numbers. Dave, what do you mean? I said, well, the numbers can't be this big. We're an established company. Our sales at that time for the month of March, first 2 weeks, were up 50% over last year. So I knew something was wrong. And she came back later and said, nope, Dave, all the hard work we've been doing, for the last 26 months, this is supposed to pay off in Q1. So you're seeing that. And that night we got this news, or I think it was Sunday, we got the news, hey, next week we're going to have to close down. And the eyewear business was closed down by the CDC, except for what would be emergency business. And what that meant for us in the month of April or thereafter, we only were seeing about 10% of our business for the next 10, 15 weeks. So we basically knew immediately we were going to be in a cash crunch. And at that point, there was no such thing as a PPP. We sat down and looked at our cash, and thankfully, we knew that we had enough cash to get us through a certain time period, and that was enough for, I felt, to be able to make some decisions. But the truth is, if we were going to run out of cash, we would go out of business. Mm-hmm. And being that I didn't understand what my industry was going to be like, because we were closed, and we had multiple millions of dollars in AR that my guys were closed, my customers are closed. So how am I going to get paid from people who are also closed? So it was very, very, very scary for a couple of weeks. The interesting part here, and I think Rich alluded to it a bit, I think a lot of the leadership style that came out of Clear Vision was somewhat intuitive, and it was all done for the first time. So it wasn't something that I was trained for. I don't have an MBA in transformational leadership. It's a family-owned and operated business, and most of the work that we've done over the years was, guided by the family members and the team members. But what quickly happened at the company was 2 or 3 things. One, my own leadership style, which I would say is more collaborative, became a little bit more directive. And that meant this is what we have to do. It's almost like in an emergency on a boat. Somebody has to take charge. And oftentimes, there are reluctant leaders. And I think I was a little bit reluctant to lead that way because it's not my style. But that happened first. We saw a number of people inside the organization raise their hand and say, I'll participate. And the finance group was doing a phenomenal job. And then what we call HR at most companies, Clear Vision, we call it talent. Talent did a great job because we understood there were 2 things that were very important. Cash was critically important, and our staff was critically important. Almost anything else didn't matter. Almost anything else really didn't matter. So we wanted to be communicative, as Rich pointed out, and we had a system for that. And we had a system for really preserving our cash and communicating with vendors and customers about what that cash was going to look like. So for us, there was an immediate, let's call it an emergency management system that came into place. But I will be clear, we did not have a disaster recovery plan in advance that anticipated this. That was not the case. That was not the case. Looking back at it, we are working on one should it happen again. We had a disaster recovery plan if the computers go down, not if everything goes down. And in our case, we're working, as I mentioned to you earlier, we're working now in 2 different businesses. We have the distribution business, which is open, and we run in shifts, and we have everyone else working remotely. So unlike Kevin and Rich, who are in offices now, I'm at home, and along with every other worker other than a distribution center worker, everyone's been at home for 7 months. And as I mentioned to you earlier, we don't have a date for when we will come back. We can come into the office if you want. So I go there every so often. But other than the distribution center, everyone's working remotely. And that was the biggest challenge we had because we didn't have 100 laptops set up immediately. Luckily, we had been a Zoom client for many, many years, so we were okay there. But we had to get everyone ready. And that was the biggest challenge. So for us, I think the one point that I would say that was kind of cool at the end of all of that, end of 3 or 4 weeks, was one of my friends sent me in essence, a business plan that was put out by Bain or Boston Consulting Group. I don't remember. It was, a 23-page plan that this is what you should have done, or this is what you can do. And I looked at it with my team, and seriously, all 23 pages, I think we intuitively got to what, this consulting group would have asked us to do. So I was very proud of the team. And since then, it's been, very much of a team effort. We meet every morning at 8:30, going over projects and looking at what happened yesterday and planning for what happens tomorrow. But the leadership aspect of it changed in the organization. But I want to be clear, not purposefully. It was like reluctant. This is what has to happen.
Mm-hmm. So that's interesting. So I want to pick up on the working remotely topic, right? It was something that some of our businesses had to do, either because of the CDC regulations or because of the governor's orders in New York. And then there are other businesses that had to stay open to some degree and be staffed, Kevin, I would imagine, at the branches.
Mm-hmm.
And so, what have we learned about working remotely? And is it something that, as we come back now, is it something that we're going to continue to some degree? What are your thoughts on that?
Sorry, my thoughts are Kevin.
David, you're speaking. Go right ahead.
Okay. So as I mentioned, our challenge was in managing the families and their responsibilities and managing safety. So our office is a very nice office where I would say in most cases, you're more than 6 feet apart from everybody. However, it's very complicated when you have 150 people in one building and you have an active distribution center. You're touching a lot of papers and packages. And remember, if you go back to that early time period, it was wash your hands 100 times a day, don't touch things. It was kind of crazy in the beginning. So this working remotely, and we worked in shifts now. We started working in shifts then, ABC shifts. So we reduced the number of staff, and for safety purposes in the DC, moved everyone out. Everyone else that's working remote has been working remote since then. What are the challenges is I have a family member at home. I'm taking care of a mom. I'm taking care of 2 little kids. I'm a nursing mom. My daycare is shut down. Schools are shut down. So we had to manage all of that. The most important thing I think we did was to get everyone set up as comfortably as we could, within reason. Expectations maybe were reduced a little bit in the beginning as to, to be more flexible with everybody. But after a while, each and every person has been comfortable working remotely. What we have learned is that communication is critically important. We have the concept of, we use Microsoft Teams, for example, inside the company, which is a great product. And we oftentimes are doing just as we're doing now. We're talking to people as if we were in the office, just across from the desk. I feel very comfortable with these guys right now, but we do that on a regular basis all the time. Emails been reduced by at least 50%. Quick text through Teams has increased dramatically. Yeah, I think those are the biggest challenges. As far as going back, so we asked people, do you want to go back to the office? And what we learned was, I was afraid that everybody wanted to go back immediately. That was my concern. And how could I set up a business that would allow people to come back safely? That was my biggest concern. But I found out that at least 95% of my employees would prefer to work remotely right now. So that was interesting. And we survey the group probably every 6 to 8 weeks to get feedback that way. But working remotely, and that's why I mentioned to you earlier, it seems to be a perfectly easy way to work. The biggest challenges are if you're not good, if you don't have the right setup in your house, if you're not good being alone, a certain amount of social anxiety from being alone. And we've addressed that too, because like tomorrow I'm supposed to go to a group lunch at a park. So we're all going to get together every so often. But it's important to determine for whether it's Rich's business or Kevin's business, how remote fits in. At Clear Vision, it fits in very, very nicely. We've made that transition, and I think will stay that way for quite some time.
Mm-hmm. It's, you bring up a good point. It's in terms of the fit for the business and working
Yeah.
remotely and perhaps giving us a different perspective on how we look at working remotely. Because, before March, did anyone here ever think, well, my employees could work remote?
Never,
No.
never.
And
I was,
do, yeah, go ahead, David, sorry. Yeah.
no, I was saying, I'm sorry, I apologize. I was against it. I didn't think you can, we've actually hired people and incorporated them into our culture since then. So I was the kind of guy saying you have to be in the building to be in the culture, but it's not. You just have to figure out how to work remotely. And the funny part was we have 80 remote salespeople, and I never realized that we had a remote business for them. I just never realized it. And that's been there's been a certain amount of excitement and a certain amount of challenge. But working remotely for us also, some people had 70-minute commutes in the morning. Those commutes are gone. I took a meeting yesterday in my backyard. It was 72 degrees here, as you all know, on Long Island and sunny. And I took a meeting in the backyard via Zoom. You can't do that at the office, or you didn't think about it anyway.
Right. How about for you, Rich and Kevin, the whole concept of working remotely and.
As I said, I think first off, I think it's one of the things I think we'll all agree. It's gratifying when this all occurred to see the depth of leadership I think we have in our organization, that when what happened is you saw people step up. And so we were also not prepared to work remotely. I mean, as a bank, we're supposed to have a disaster recovery plan, and we spend lots of effort on it. When we actually had to put into action, we recognized the holes in that plan. And so we had to scramble the same thing you did to basically get laptops and, be able to put that in place and put all the firewalls and things. And, and again, people sort of stepping up, creating a factory basically to create these laptops. And, I'm glad that we are a small enough company to basically to figure out different ways to buy them. And so we're able to accomplish that. But for us, we again have sort of these two businesses. We still have this customer facing business that you need to be there. And our success, whether you come into our branch or not, is you want to talk to somebody in a branch. So we have that part of it. We are basically same thing, sort of A's and B teams, so we don't have a full building. And it has worked, again, better than I thought it was going to work. I guess I do have some concerns about the long-term development of younger people in our organization, because so much of what we think they're gaining is from the interaction with us on a regular basis. And, we spent a whole lot of time basically saying that you should get things from nonverbal cues and all of those levels of communication. And every tech company built, huddle rooms and spaces where people can go and collaborate. This is not as natural to collaborate, so I wonder how that evolves. But we will probably have some level of people that, because of their situations, and that's where it gets back to, as you said, we know more about our employees' situations than we ever did before, because there are certain people that can't come back. And so, we all have to be flexible as we move forward. But we're trying to put together two different companies today. We announced a merger in July. That's basically, it's a company equal in size. So we're taking two 500-person companies and trying to put them together. That has probably been a little bit more of a challenge, trying to do that remotely. Eventually we will, we'll probably have most of our workforce back in, except for situations where they can, and we're flexible from that standpoint. But this has been a great opportunity to see the real the strength in our organization rise up and become leaders.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. And Rich, I mean, you said you've been there you've gone into the office from day one, right? Yeah. So how has your business fared in working remotely, and what are some of the things that you did to continue to motivate employees while they were working remotely?
So a couple of key things for us early on. One was, as Kevin was just mentioning, his IT. We really didn't know the capacity of our IT infrastructure, because now, we always had an ability for people to work remotely, but it was really sporadic. So now you're going to have, an influx of 500 people all looking to access the network at the same time, working on large files. Some of the file sizes of the design drawings that people are working on are significant. Mm-hmm. Programs that take up, boatloads of memory and things like that. So we actually conducted a couple of stress tests in late March, and, good news, bad news. bad news is we failed because there were lots of people that couldn't connect in. Good news is that we learned early on things we needed to do to enhance our IT infrastructure. And, for a company like ours, we invest a lot of money in, various softwares that assist in design. And, before the pandemic, I would have thought that, from a percentage perspective, we were investing pretty well in IT. And when I saw how productivity was affected by so many people working remotely, I've been connected to the hip with my IT team because, we're looking at, a complete transformation of our IT infrastructure platform, investing more money. If we had to go through this again, I need to make sure that the employees are going to be as productive as if they were in the office. And they were productive, but I just think there were natural limitations to how productive they could be in doing their work. So, I've got a responsibility to create an environment where if they are going to be working remotely, that they can be productive because, if you assume that all employees want to do the best job they can, anytime IT gets in the way of productivity, people get frustrated quickly. Whether you get kicked out or files take a long time to load or all of those things. So we're putting a lot into that now. And I think that's going to set us up for the future where I envision more remote work. Probably second key thing. And, we've always had I'll call it more of a flexibility policy as opposed to like specifically remote work. But it was, at manager discretion, and if employee had to, the plumber's coming this afternoon and I need to work half a day from home, okay, no problem. But it wasn't a company-wide strategy in remote work. So, I'm at a point now where I'm going to be rolling out a new, flexible work week, remote work policy where it's really going to lay out expectations of employees, expectations of managers, so that you don't get into a situation where if a lot of people are working remotely and it's really affecting the business, now you're going to be forced to have to pull something back that people started to recognize as a benefit, and that's not going to go over well with people. So since the fact that you could kind of say, okay, pandemic's in the rearview mirror a bit. So, we're going to now develop a remote work strategy on our terms, make sure expectations are clear, make sure employees, I've got a remote work pledge. I want managers and employees to sign a pledge that says that, if I've got to get the kids on the bus in the morning and that's going to, commit me from 8 to 9, well then, I'm going to put in that extra hour from 5 to 6, whatever it needs to be. We have to trust our people, but we need to make sure that they recognize that we are putting trust in them and that they have a responsibility to the organization, just like we have a responsibility to the employees.
Sure. So, one of the things that, we don't know, I mean, we're not even out of the first wave, right? So some folks would say, some scientists would say, that we're not out of the first wave. So, but, the expectation is, or the prediction is that, when the second wave does hit, or as we, the second wave of the first wave, if there is such a thing, comes back, that we're going to see a rise in infections as the weather gets colder, particularly here in Long Island and in New York, and that we're going to see infections go up. We take a look at the map now across the United States, and you see that nearly every single state has a rise in infections again, including New York. And it may not be obviously as dramatic as it was in March, April, May, but the trajectory is going up. So, how are you guys handling this period of the unknown, both from employee morale and confidence, and also looking at revenue streams that perhaps could be affected again, or are we prepared for it because we've been through it?
Well, you know, I would say right now, without wanting to be the Dr. Doom and Gloom on the call, that most of our planning has been extremely long-term. So I believe that based on the science that's available right now, and I mean as a layperson, as a person just reading, that we're in this for much longer than most people would admit or want to admit to themselves. And most businesses that I speak to, including, let's say, the ones in my industry or ones on Long Island, would be suffering from some version of COVID exhaustion, and the same for employees. But there's no question that we're going to be in this for a longer haul. And I think if we don't plan for that, that's problematic. As far as, you know, revenue streams, our biggest challenge, again, on the ClearVision side, is that we're governed by the FDA and CDC in the sense that we're in this medical business, and it's possible that we can get shut down again in some. Imagine, you know, the typical doctor's office. That's where mostly where you're buying your eyewear. If the doctor would normally see 3 patients an hour, now they're seeing 2 or 1.5. So everything's been slowed down for us. Strangely enough, for a lot of reasons, revenues per patient are up, and we think there's a lot of reasons for that, but it's somewhat unique to our industry. So revenue per patient's up, but revenue flow is down. If our industry gets shut down, that'll be a problem. That's why we've had such a focus on preserving cash, and that's something that's very difficult to talk to your employees about, because everybody would like to get back to work tomorrow easily. We've had, you know, ClearVision in 71 years has not had any furloughs or reduction in workforces, and this is the first time we've had this. There's been permanent reduction here for our company, which I'm not, happy about, or I'm not proud about, but the transactions that we have inside the company are also down. So while the revenue per transaction is up, the busyness, if you will, is down. And that, that has to also be addressed. I think if we don't look at the future very conservatively and at the same time aggressively, which is I don't know if that's possible for many businesses, be aggressive and conservative, then we are putting ourselves in the wrong position for go forward. I hope that starts to answer the question for the other guys.
I mean, what you're talking about really is forecasting ahead, and that requires leadership, right? And that requires, sometimes making the difficult decisions that had to be made, whether it's, in your instance, one of the many difficult decisions it sounds like you had to make was reducing the workforce for the first time in 71 years for ClearVision. And it's not an easy decision, right? We had to reduce our workforce too. In looking in March, we said, okay, let's look forward to November, we actually said, and say, what is it going to look like in November? And we have to take action now. And it's a horrible thing to do, for me personally. It didn't feel right. It didn't feel good, because these folks, have lives and their families and everything else. So, but Rich, I saw you, I think you wanted to say something to that.
No, I just think that by taking a look at trying to be a little more aggressive, I agree with everything that David had said. But for me, I'm really trying to push hard on my leadership team in order to be innovative, be creative when they take a look at 2021, and I started my planning process for that already. And for us, we're fortunate that we provide professional services to numbers of different markets. And I think back to the Great Recession we had in 2008, and how a lot of companies in my industry, when private sector just died, you couldn't get financing anywhere. Projects were completely either put on hold or just off the boards altogether, we were able to reassign staff to work in other markets. So as other businesses like mine were laying off a quarter of their workforce, we didn't have to, and we stayed flat. We didn't grow. And then coming out of that recession, we really I think had an opportunity to springboard forward. And I'm kind of looking at this as a little bit of a compressed similarity where we weren't forced to lay people off, and we were able to reassign some people. Yes, I think that it's going to prolong into 2021, and I think a lot is going to hinge on the federal government coming through with more rescue packages for state and local government. That's going to affect my business in a significant way. I have to think that they will at some point, and when they do, then I think we're in a strong position to be able to move ourselves forward. But at the same time, we're not relying on that, and we are looking for opportunities to move into different areas where we can generate some new revenue streams, and not being complacent, not being concerned about we are where we are. So we are trying to take a more aggressive approach moving forward.
Yep. And I think we'll find out a lot more in 19 days, right? About what we can look for, and just that's a word of encouragement for folks to go out and vote. Not to say who to vote, but to make sure that you do go out to vote. Early voting in New York starts October 24th, next Saturday, October 24th. And boy, I said that like I have a Long Island accent, 24th.
So for us, our business is really keyed off these two businesses, right? And so how they feel about the future. And so, I'm optimistic like you, Rich, that the government will, once we get past the 19 days from now, cooler heads will prevail, and they'll recognize that if we are not on the other side, I've used the expression, the PPP was to get people to the other side. The other side is now 7 months later, and there may be a longer road to get there. And so I truly believe at a certain point in time, we actually do have smart people in Washington, and they will recognize they have a responsibility to basically deliver what they're supposed to do and create the programs that will hopefully, lead us through. But as I hear this, it makes me recognize, and I know that we have talked internally, initially as an industry, people basically, we went on these forbearance agreements, and close to 20% of our loans, people weren't paying us every month, and that was preserving cash flow. And most of those now are back paying. But, if this continues, and then the feeling is it might, where do we go? What's the next step? So we are, same level of communication that I think that we have talked about all needing internally with our employees. For us as a service industry too, it's basically with our customers. And being out, or not being out, but being in these kind of forums where we're asking what's going on, and it's great when we, I wish all of my clients and customers were you two gentlemen, because the dialogue that you have with your finance people and your HR people, the things that we want to hear. I think that there has been a collaboration among, from the government to the banks to the companies to basically create that sort of buffer of that window, and it needs to continue.
Yep.
David, if I just want to circle back to something that, that Rich said. So when I said it's this combination of conserving and being aggressive, obviously on the revenue side, you want to be as aggressive as you can in many projects. Well, on the conservation side, you actually want to look internally inside your business, not only from a cash perspective, but how's the business running? So when we were closed for that 10 or 12 weeks, we initiated something that I had no idea would ultimately lead to this conference call called Transformational Leadership. We actually made plans to transform our business. And the call I made this morning with my team was to congratulate them, because we're running two businesses right now. We're running the ClearVision Optical business, which pays the bills, and the revenue comes into ClearVision, and we're doing that on about 50% of the time. The other 50% of the time, we're building a new company at the same time. We are actually painting a moving bus, and that's been extremely exciting and in some ways stressful, tiring for the team. But I wanted to point out to them that they're accomplishing an unbelievable amount of work. And what I mean by new business, I mean the way we're going to run our business in 2021 will be dramatically different. And Rich alluded to this, and when he talked about IT, yes, I never thought I'd even understand what a file size was. I didn't think I needed to understand that. We have now, for a company our size, we have way more IT than most companies would have. We have 5 full-time programmers creating software that will create efficiencies in our business, such the work that would normally be done for everybody in the company, will be reduced anywhere from 20 to 30%. So I have to ask myself, what was I doing before? I was fat, dumb, and happy before. I didn't look at it that way. COVID slapped me in the head. COVID made me understand things that probably my dad would have told me 20 or 30 years ago that I probably forgot. So running a business very lean on the inside and being very revenue centric on the outside. At the same time, Kevin keeps on coming back to, you got to know who your customers are, how they think, how you relate to them, face to face, or as we say right now in our business, mask to mask, because we're doing that as well. That's what's been going on in our company. As far as what I think is going to happen, and we talked about the federal government, I agree with you guys. I think the federal government is smart. What I think is important for anyone on Long Island is to understand what I was alluding to, is that this is not over. It will have other iterations. Once half the restaurants, if that's the number, in New York City really close down, or once 1 or 2 airlines goes out of business or gets merged, or any of those other things that happen, once Broadway doesn't come back, the businesses that really are affected, the events business, think about anybody that had a parking concession near any of the stadiums nearby. All of those things are not yet impacted in the way that we could potentially be impacted. And I think that's where many of us are not looking into the economic challenges that come after a second wave or a third wave. I personally believe the harder time will be next March, April, May, when the weather gets nice and people start to act really differently. Now we're going to hunker down for a couple of months. That's my opinion. Everyone's wearing a mask. I don't think the flu season is going to be as dramatically crazy. Anecdotally, I can tell you my pharmacist said that his antibiotics, dispensing of antibiotics is all down. We couldn't figure it out until everyone's wearing a mask. So a lot of things that, that are not on the radar screen, and at Clear Vision, the word that came up the most in the last couple of months that I didn't think I had one, but apparently I do, and we all do, is blind spot. What's the blind spot? What's the stuff we don't know? And I think that's the part that would be most important for businesses to look at. What don't we know that's really going to happen? I'm listening to what Rich is saying, and Kevin and you, and I'm wondering, I'm taking notes you saw, what's going to happen in my business based on what I'm learning from these guys right now.
Right. Yeah, and the unknown is something that certainly has become central in our minds, from March on, right? Who expected this? Just want to go back quick to Rich. You had said that you're about to release expectations for working remotely, right? Is there a way that I'm sure like so many people who are watching this would want to hear a preview of what those expectations are, because this was something that just got thrust upon us, had no choice but to work remotely, and and had to deal with it moment by moment. So what are some of the expectations that you're gonna lay out?
So I think there's numbers of buckets in that, and the first is we provided guidance early on to all the employees when they got thrust into remote work in terms of what your workday should be like, what your work environment should be like. That is in our policy. You really need to prepare for your day as if you're coming into the office. Take a shower, eat breakfast, get dressed. We go through all of that. What your work environment is going to be like, not sitting on the edge of your bed, not, all due respect to David's great Zoom meeting out in his backyard, not working in the backyard. When you're on, virtual meetings, have your video on, look professional, all of those things, because as much as you can do to mimic the work environment, I believe is going to put employees in a better position to be able to, one, do their jobs as effectively as they can, but two, if something happens and you need to then get yourself back into the office, the power goes down in your house, you lose your Wi-Fi, there are numbers of things that could happen that are going to prevent you from continuing to work remotely. So, at the flip of a switch, you might need to now report to the office and work in the office. So we really want people to be prepared. We also want to make sure that performance metrics are clear. So if you're an engineer, an architect, or a scientist that is working on client projects, and you have a certain utilization rate, that's going to demonstrate how productive you are, you need to continue to meet those rates, because you working on projects is going to drive revenue for the organization. And if everybody working remotely kind of drops off in productivity, that compounded effect is significant on the business. And it's then going to cause us to have to make decisions to pull people back in, which we would prefer not to do. So if everybody continues to focus on being as productive as they can, then, this kind of new approach to how people do work is sustainable. I really don't want to be in a position where, this is a new benefit that employees can leverage, and in 6 or 12 months, I then have to pull the rug out because people are either taking advantage of it or they're not being as effective as we need them to be. So we're trying to put a lot of the pieces in place without really micromanaging them, because, as I said earlier, we want to trust them, and we want to make sure that our employees recognize the fact that we have faith in them, that they are going to be able to do their jobs as effectively remotely as they would in the office. Not easy to do in a policy. You can't policy out trusting people, but I think you can put enough in there that makes it clear, if you're a good performer for your company, then you should be able to effectively work remotely. And that's really the environment we're trying to establish, through a policy, so that there's as much clarity as possible in people being able to perform their job.
David, I have a question for Rich and Kevin, if you don't mind me asking it, because the word productivity has come up a couple of times. And I'm just curious if you guys feel either, you feel it subjectively or it objectively, that productivity has gone down in the last 7 months for the organization. I won't say per employee, but for the organization because of remote, or would you say it's the same or up?
I'll just say, I think that Rich, I'd love to take offline some of the things that you're doing, because that's the struggle that I'm having, how you do it. And almost how you enforce some of that will be the question I really would ask. But I think we're all that have a big workforce working remotely, I think we are seeing, a number of our employees go above and beyond. And, I'm kicking them off the computer at 2:00 in the morning because they do need that downtime. And then, anecdotally, as I walk around the building, because I've been here and you talk to some of the people, they're frustrated with some of their employees that may not be honoring. We don't have a written code, but an unwritten code as to what should be that responsibility. So the ability to memorialize it that you have, Rich, or you discussed about it, is something that interests me, because I think that will be something that's necessary, because it does get back to accountability and responsibility to your fellow employees.
Yeah. So David, I think for us, it's been tough to gauge. So I think it's going to be a little more subjective in my view of how productive the staff were able to be, during the pandemic. Because at the same time, I did have projects, some sizable projects that shut down. One of the positive aspects to our business is that the majority of our clients were also deemed to be essential business, so they didn't have to shut down. So because they didn't have to shut down, we didn't have to shut down. However, some of the significant development projects we're working on, all kind of halted or at least paused. So the backlog dropped. Opportunities to work on projects kind of dropped. So I think we, as an organization, productivity clearly fell, without a doubt. But it was probably a combination of not being as effective in remote work and the fact that we had a number of pretty sizable projects that got put on pause.
The reason why I ask is, and I can say this very definitively, objectively and subjectively, the productivity in our company is up at least 30%, both in the DC and remotely. In the DC, we're working 6-hour shifts. We're paying for 8. That means you get to work 6 hours from 6:30 to 12:30, and we accomplish as much as a person would normally do in 8 hours. So we've made a lot of system changes. You talked about IT. Our IT group is going crazy. Our process improvement team is going crazy. On the outside, while I don't like people, Kevin, working till 2 o'clock at night, I actually got an email last night at 1:10 from a very good employee that I was almost embarrassed that she answered. You know, it's that I had sent earlier, but I was embarrassed that she answered. I'm thinking, what is she doing up at 1:10? I don't want that to happen, but I can say during the normal workday, we are seeing productivity 20 to 30% more. And I think that is, I don't know that it's sustainable, to be clear, because it may be that people are using their commuting time, maybe they're cutting down their lunch hours, etc. But certainly they're not, as we like to say on Long Island, kibitzing. They're not kibitzing with each other as much. And that in all offices, while it is productive to have water cooler conversations, you know, it's productive, it's a grease in the business. At the same time, there's unbelievable amount of productivity that I saw when people knew they had this mission. That's why I ask if it's sustainable. I don't know that it is sustainable, but my goal, by the way, is to continue to tie into this without burning anybody out. That's very clear to me. It's not my goal. But this happened naturally again. It wasn't because of anything I initiated in the organization. We just said to ourselves, wow, we're getting a lot more work done. How is this happening? And the last part of it, which both of you guys mentioned, is metrics. So we go over the metrics every morning. And that's one of the things that we found that in the last 6 or 7 months, because we couldn't do management by walking around, we had to have these metric dashboards that were measuring everything. Productivity per employee, per project, per piece, per hour. And it's all there in one form or another. And we're able to see almost on a daily basis when we fall behind. And I don't think we were doing that before. So my message to anybody that's, you know, on this call, meaning the audience on the call, the guys here too, is I personally believe that COVID will initiate or instigate new business methods, new ways of doing business. Remote is going to be here for quite some time by choice. I think the policies that we have to have for our employees need to be much more flexible. We can't imagine taking what work is in a building and then putting it at home. And at the same time, understanding that you can't take work at home. I got that part about working on the bed. My daughter was doing that for a couple of months, and consider that to be an easy way to do this. You know, we have a really interesting group of people inside the company that are caring for others. We've just initiated stipends for anybody that's working at home to make sure they have the right chair, the right equipment, any money they spent, we're paying for it. So this is the kind of things that I think would be very beneficial for anyone on Long Island, that it can have a remote workforce. And I do believe there'll be more people that will want to be remote. And if this goes on for quite some time, what I believe is that the workforce will want to be remote. So that means we may not even have a choice anymore about being a family-friendly business that we think we are. Family-friendly may be, I have 2 kids, Dave, I'm a talented marketer, I'm a talented draftsman. I'd like to work at home. And I'm going to say yes to that going forward. I would never have said yes to that before COVID.
Very interesting. You know, and I think that, you know, that brings me to maybe talking about opportunity. And Rich, offline, I'd also love to see what you put together, because I think it's a challenge that we all face, and you know, as leaders. And how do you balance? How do you balance, you know, the need for the productivity always needs to be there, right? But how do you balance the need for, professionalism versus, and I'll just share an example. One thing I learned early on in doing these Zoom meetings with our team, there was one instance where, someone turned off their video and you saw their name on the screen. I was like, all right, and then the meeting ended and their name on the screen stayed there. I said, let's stay on for 10 minutes. That means they weren't there. They weren't listening because the meeting ended 10 minutes ago. And then there was someone else that did that. And so I reached out to them and they said, listen, you know what, as we talked about before, you learn more about your employees, right? That I'm embarrassed about my home situation, and so, it requires, so, you have some people, you think maybe taking advantage and some people maybe, and then you have others who we just need to get to know a little bit better, while we balance the need, well, we have to balance productivity, revenue, and et cetera. So, I definitely would be really interested. I don't know if you want to comment on that, Rich.
I agree, and I think that's we went through the gambit as well, and again, as we're talking today about what we've learned and what the opportunities are, during the pandemic, it was all hands on deck. Do the best you can. So you're having virtual meetings with kids. In the background, and yes, in theory, you would love to be able to have professional meetings without the kids running around, but that's everybody's reality. And I agree with your point, David. And we do want to understand all the various circumstances that all of our employees are dealing with at home. And frankly, that's the ultimate driver of our remote work approach, is to accommodate personal or life circumstances that everybody has, whether it is, caring for a parent, or, having to care for your kids, or, you have your own personal underlying health concern, and you really are so uncomfortable leaving your house that you want to be able to have some accommodation, and we want to accommodate people that way. So, we're going to continue to be really open-minded in that. At the same time, you do still need to have some structure in what your expectations are for people, and it's a fine line. It's not intended to communicate we don't trust you or we don't think you can do a good job, but it's, again, I think with any manager-employee relationship, if the expectations are clear, you're in a better position to be successful.
I think just to follow up on that, for us, when we first went remote, that was when PPP hit. And so we were working 24/7, and we literally were working shift work. And, I was setting, the 3 o'clock in the morning when the new shift came on to basically welcome people. And so it became a 2-month process. And so now that you've rolled off of that and you're back to sort of the normal, what you think would be the normal work week, how do you basically sort of now transition to that? And if it's going to be, and even the interaction, as we said, we have A and B shifts. So now you've got basically people that are A during the day. The B people, to really interact with those people, have to basically set their workday up to basically be a regular workday. They can't, I want to work from 8 to midnight. Well, that's not really working if you're part of a team that's working 8 to 4. And so I think all of that, in the heat of the battle, we all jumped in and did what we need to do. If this is going to be a long term, and that's why I think, Rich, we all made our notes about you, and we'll all be calling you, because I think we're all trying to figure out how this will be, if it's going to be the new normal, how you manage that.
Well, but the real question, and obviously, I think Rich pointed it out. I am seeing something that it may be because of the heat of the battle, so it may be because of that. But I don't have these same concerns that we've talked about just in the last 10 minutes, meaning the trust level in my organization is very high now. It always was high, now it's higher. We've delegated a lot more work to people. We've seen the best in people. We've challenged people. If someone doesn't answer a Teams message in 3 or 4 minutes, because it all comes up on our desks, as we know, I don't think they're out doing something else. I don't think that way. And it's something I think that's really interests me that's going on. And I'm going to encourage the conversation to be maybe what we learned in the heat of the battle, maybe that's what's going to be going forward the real way. I think if we manage, I think what Rich, you pointed out, if you have the expectations and they're clear, because we have a remote work from home policy. We've had it for years. We have these, passes that if the plumber's coming to your house, you can work at home. We have all that. But I think what's happened with us, because you guys are back at work. See, that's the difference.
Yep.
I'm remote for 7 months. By the way, not to be funny, I encourage everybody to take a meeting in their backyard. I encourage everybody to come onto meetings with their kids. I have no problem with that, because the person themselves, they'll figure out what they're comfortable with. So when we see a mom that brings her, 1 or 2 year old baby onto the video, we are pretty cool with that. Just put it on mute, no problem. And then after 3 or 4 minutes, you'll get bored and you'll put your baby back where that baby belongs. So I'm just wondering, to the group of us, hey, is it something, did we learn something from COVID about running our businesses that maybe we would never think about before? That's really the question. And of course, the work from home policies you have to have safety, you have to have accountability, you have to have productivity, you have to have teamwork. All of that has to be there. And we don't have the same business, Rich, as you, or the banking business the same. It's smaller. It's, maybe less sophisticated in some ways, but we're doing all of our product signups. We do about 200 new products designed, kind of like what you do, in CAD a year. All of that's being done remotely. All samples are being sent to people's homes. We had to do all that in the last 6 or 7 months. So it's been quite fascinating to me. As I was a student of watching what's going on, it's fascinating. And I think we can't take old-fashioned business, whatever it was, and stick it into remote. I think we have to say, what's the best way we run remote? And that's the cool.
Interesting. So let's go with David's question. What have we learned from, working remotely? That may change the way we do the course of our business to some degree in the future, or to a greater degree, like David has said, with clear vision.
So I think what's really interesting is, as I'm listening to David, and your enthusiasm is fantastic, by the way.
No coffee.
No, well, I'm so now I have a new bar now. I'm going to set my enthusiasm bar to David's enthusiasm bar. So what's really interesting about what he said, and a challenge for me and us, engineering is typically a very conservative profession to begin with. So to big change is challenging, intuitively challenging. And I think that, one of my responsibilities here is, I deal with the leadership team that has, their own point of view about, how can you most effectively conduct your business. So although at the end of the day, I'm the person who's making the decisions here, clearly I need to listen to people, take their opinion, take their feedback, build consensus, and then make decisions. So a lot of our policy moving forward in terms of, maintaining effective business approach by also, having an enhanced benefit for employees that they could work remotely, kind of has its own internal challenges. And there's a spectrum. So if everybody is aligned with, we're definitely going to be able to handle remote work, and everybody is going to do the right thing all the time, then, the assessment is kind of easy, because everybody involved has the same level of confidence that everybody's going to be able to do their job well. In cases where that doesn't exist, you can have a company-wide policy that doesn't recognize the fact that it might be more applicable to one group than to another group, because what you end up doing is creating internal inconsistencies. You run the risk of creating resentment because one group is really leveraging remote work and another group is not, because managers are struggling with their employees. So we're obligated to think through as much of that as possible before we roll something out. And you know, as I said earlier, you know, the last thing I want to do is roll something out formally, have it fail, and then be forced to kind of pull it back. So I've got lots of meetings and conversations internally. I've probably had this thing reviewed by the executive team 5 different times because somebody comes up with a new idea or a new concern, and I want to make sure we cover as much as we can before we kind of roll it out to the masses. This way, it's intended to be an expanded benefit. It's intended to recognize personal circumstances for all the employees at various levels. And you know, it's clearly intended to be something that is going to enhance our business, not compromise our business.
I guess from my perspective, and I think Rich, you hit a little bit, is because of half of our workforce is really, their job is to actually go to the, you know, they run a branch, they run a retail location, so they have to be there. And then you've got the other half. You want to make sure you balance and it's fair to both sides. And I think we have made some changes as a regulated industry. Sometimes that's a challenge. The changes that you can maybe make on the fly are much more difficult for us to do. And then as I said before, we're in the middle of we merged with another bank. So we're going to put our 2 companies together, 500 employees strong on both sides. And you want to get one consistent culture. And so I worry about the ability to do that. You know, you've been successful hiring people. That's amazing. I know that's been a lot of people's challenge to be able to hire people and bring them and indoctrinate you into the culture of the organization, because I think all of us are successful because we think we have a strong culture. And to bring somebody from the outside, how do you get that, meld that culture? You've been successful. I think we have been to a degree, but I worry about it on a large scale. And so, you know, it will be something we deal with in the future, but you know, as we sit here and as you said, you're planning for 2021, I'm planning for 2021 to double the size of our organization. And so I'm trying to figure out how to do that when we're doing all of this way. And so, and you know, cultures are different.
I think, you know, by the way, David, I think you took us in a very interesting part of the discussion, you know, you know, I don't know about the other fellows, but I would vote for round 2 to finish some of the other things that were on your plate. This has been a great discussion. As far as culture goes, though, you know, some of the things that you guys are talking about, you know, someone being in a meeting and, you know, putting themselves on blank. When that happened the first 1 or 2 times, I let it go. Second, third time, I called their manager. Third time, I called them. Doesn't happen anymore. If you're embarrassed about what your background looks like, that's my stuff. Put on a screen. That's okay. You know, we have no problem with that. So you know, interviewing, we do all this interviewing right now. We've been doing interviewing for years by Zoom. We have an active, you know, really robust interviewing process where if somebody doesn't get a job with us, they might even say thank you for the interview, because I learned a lot more about myself than I did before. But that said, I guess what I'm trying to say to you guys, you know, you 2 guys and David and people who are listening, is I believe COVID will transform the way business works. Whatever was going to happen in 10 years, come down to 2 years. So that's the rush that I'm at. The enthusiasm you might see is more a manic side of me, not enthusiasm. You know, I think things are going to happen very, very quickly. And that's why we're in this rush, as I told you before, 4 hours to do your regular business, 4 hours to work on these projects that will transform the company. And I do believe that we've been meeting with major customers. Our customers could be someone like Costco, who says, look, we don't have a travel policy anymore and you can't visit us. How do we then do business with this guy when we're doing millions of dollars of business? We have to be able to do it through Zoom, through sampling, through other ways. And, you know, all the different things we're doing. We do 3D printing inside our business now. I think some of you guys know this. So we print all our own samples now. I mean, this is, you know, the way that we're doing our business is tremendously different. I also believe that COVID will change it. So whatever when COVID's over, I think the changes will be in place. The changes will be in place. That's what I believe. The same way after 9/11, who would have told you have to take off your shoes in 1995 before you get on an airplane? Who would have told you that? You would have said you're crazy. But think about the things that happen every time there's a major change in society. Society gets branded with that, and some people just pick it up. who would have thought that my wife can order from Burger King, from DoorDash or whatever it's called, Dine and Dash, an $8 hamburger, a vegan hamburger at Burger King, and it gets delivered to our house. It's crazy. And it's not Amazon, it's the world now. So I would just say that, as I said before, let's not think about our businesses as traditional businesses that are getting worked around COVID. Think that COVID made us see that other things are possible, including for Clear Vision, you know, working with remote people in other countries, which we never would have done. We just never would have done it. So I think that's part of it. Now, again, understanding that banks are regulated and, you know, engineers are by nature conservative, of course, but we don't want to be, we want to be like Eleanor Roosevelt. We want to change before we have to change. That's
Right.
the thing.
Well, that's a good point to end on, and I apologize to not getting to some of our questions, or any of our questions actually. But you know, the discussion was so good. But I think, you know, what you know, what we see is that, you know, we've gone from one extreme to the other, right? Where everyone had to go remote. We had no choice, or most people had to go remote. Kevin, you in your business, you know, there had to be folks there to navigate the PPP and continue the banking industry. And so, you know, and much like everything else in our culture here in the United States, there tends to be somewhere that it'll eventually will drift back to whatever a happy medium or middle is. But I think, like David said, you know, remote work's not going away, you know, and it's going to be here. It was here years before as well. It was something personally that I was just adamantly against. You know, when folks would say, you know, can people work remotely? You know, and there are folks that work in our organization that can, I now see, you know, and so, you know, I'm not all the way, I mean, I have some enthusiasm, but not as great as David about that, because I'm still in the mindset that we all need to be seeing one another. And there's something about that personal contact that is real important, but it's not going away. So how do we expand our minds and think of this as opportunity, which it sounds like, you know, pretty much everyone here has done, which is, you know, in many ways, a lot of the underpinnings of transformational leaders. So, you know, hey, I would love to do a second round of this. You know, I think HIA is coming back on. I think Anthony's coming back on.
Yeah, I'm coming back on.
All righty. So there we go. I apologize to some of our folks who were watching for not getting to your questions, but I think a lot of the stuff was covered, you know, through the discussion. So Anthony, I'm going to, first of all, thank you so much to Kevin, to Rich, to David. You know, your honesty, being direct, I mean, it was just, you know, incredible. It was inspiring. I learned a lot from listening to you. So thank you.
David, thank you.
Great job, David, as always, moderating. What a wonderful panel. And the other David, I didn't order Burger King, but I did order Taco Bell the other day. So just to let you know, and they delivered it within, I don't know, 10 minutes. So
Unbelievable. Unbelievable.
it's unbelievable. So what a wonderful panel. I tell you, to all the attendees, thank you for attending. I'm going to go through some upcoming events. What insights from leaders that I didn't even expect that happened today. So what a great job, and thank you again. As far as upcoming events, we have our new prospective member information meeting tomorrow, followed by our Energy Environmental Conference, which we will have the CEO of PSEG Long Island on October 30th. And then we're going to ask you, because we're building an exciting Women's Leading the Way panel for November 20th. And last but not least, our Season of Giving celebration will be on December 10th. So once again, I want to thank the panel. I want to thank all the attendees. What a wonderful program. And we will plan number 2 coming up shortly.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye now.